Can you imagine paying a company to release your own wages? That's absurd, right? But surely that's some runaway capitalist feature in a sci fi dystopian show. Well, no. This is the reality for some gig economy workers. Retail assistants have accused a gig economy firm of holding them to ransom by making them pay a fee if they want to receive their wages within 30 days. A new payment system brought in by Young Ones, which supplies freelance retail assistants to many well known high street stores, charges gig workers 4.8% of their earnings to be paid in 1 minute or 2.9% to be paid in 3 days. If they decline, they typically have to wait 30 days. Previously, the workers were paid in 3 days without a charge. So, this is an outsourced company from retail businesses. Now, it is common practice that companies don't always deal with their own wages. There are many companies who offer those services fine, but third party companies charging workers to receive their own wages was incredible. Now, as mentioned in the article, the system is used by Young Ones. This is the CEO, and no, the image hasn't been photoshopped. Young Ones was created in 2017 by Pim Grafmans. Now we have some testimonies from the workers and how they've been affected by the fee. Tom Gillam, who has worked at least 6 shifts at the Emma Sleep store in Manchester, said gig workers on low and irregular wages needed money quickly to buy essentials and pay bills. People do gig work for short term cash. It feels like we're being held to ransom, he said. It is so immoral, it's unreal. Gillam, 37, claims some of the workers at the store were last week still waiting to be paid for shifts in late November and early December. They can't really badger their managers because working as a freelancer, you have no voice. You might not get any shifts anymore if you're seen as outspoken. Another worker at the Manchester store said he was forced to borrow money from his family to buy gifts and travel home for Christmas. It is unfair for people working on a low wage with reduced rights to be charged to get their money quickly, he said. Last month, The Observer revealed the growing use of gig economy workers without basic employment rights in the retail sector, a move the TUC had called worrying. Now, this is absolutely insane dystopian stuff. Helena, we all know that the gig economy has been mainly about businesses watering down workers' protections and not flexible, working conditions or shift patterns to benefit the workers. But did you foresee that companies would actually charge people for their own wages?
I mean, it's not something I necessarily foresaw, but it's something that shouldn't be surprising. I think is probably the best way that I put it. Am I surprised by this kind of thing? No. And there's a bunch of different things that have fed into how we're in this position in the first place. Of course, there is this free market ideology, right? The full on free market brain neoliberal types who believe that the loosening of labour market restrictions gets to some kind of natural supply and demand situation, regardless of any negative externalities there might be in terms of who ends up at the sharp end, the bottom end of that scale. The whole point of intervention to fix the problems with the negative externalities of free market economies is specifically to protect the people at the bottom who are at the sharpest end, well, the people with the least solidified terms and conditions, the people who are on essentially the lower skilled end of the economy, people who are going to be more likely to be within the gig economy, within casualized workforces, right? So it's the libertarians' wet dream, not so much the wet dream for the people who have to be on the sharp end of all of those decisions. So that's one issue that's got us to this point. The second is a problem of outsourcing. So every single time you want to outsource a different part of your particular business, whereas it used to be businesses would have their own HR department, they would have their own outreach, and they would do their own recruitment. All these kind of things gets outsourced again and again and again and again to all of these different people and different companies. So, for example, when I very first joined the labor market, yeah, this would have been 13 years ago now when I got my first kind of real job. This was done through a recruitment agency that was being subcontracted in an office in the larger office of the company that I was working in. So they didn't even have their own recruitment part of their own business. They actually outsourced to somebody else who came in and set up their own office in that office. And so, of course, the more times you add a layer of bureaucracy, you add another layer of outsourcing, every single one of these people will want to gain their pound of flesh. And are they going to get their pound of flesh from the people who want to have access to their contracts? Well, no, of course they're not. They're going to get their pound of flesh from you. You sitting at home there, sorry. Employers. Employers are not going to be the ones who are being having their money taken away from them, because that is who they're competing for. The contracts of the employees is going to be the employees who are the ones who are going to have their money taken away from them. And again, because it's the gig economy, it's a deregulated economy at this point in terms of how we deal with our labor market. You have no regress, you have no power. The level of unionization in these sectors is incredibly low. You're completely unprotected. You're at the mercy of the employer in this incredibly one way relationship where they have access, they have the ownership of the means of production, and you have to sell their labor to them. They are the ones who have all of the power. And of course, with that power relationship becomes the ability for exploitation. And of course, they're going to exploit you on the basics of things that you need, which is your money that you need to be able to actually live and participate in humanity. You don't have a choice, right? You don't have a choice about whether or not you go out and work for a day or work for a living because you need to put a roof over your head. So they can put barriers in front of that all they want, and you have no choice on that matter, which is incredibly dystopian. The third point I would make as well, before we move on, is that one of the key things in the New Deal for Working People that Angela Rayner was pushing for within the Labour Party in the run up to the election, now, she's a trade union, she's been that for a long time. One of the main things she was trying to push for was a single status of worker to try and end this fascination our employers have with the gig economy. And at the National Policy Forum meeting for the Labour Party, where the kind of finer points are drafted for what goes into the manifesto, there was this big force within the Starmer Politburo to try and remove the kind of gig economy protections that was being pushed for by the trade unions from the Labour manifesto, and they were successful in doing so. As far as I'm concerned, the fight against the casualisation of the workforce, the fight against the gig economy, this is the big workers' rights fight of our generation. So for the Labour Party to have essentially U-turned on this, to move away and abandon this kind of existential fight for the rights of the working class in this country is nothing short of ideological treason. The so they may have done some good things on people with proper contracts in terms of things like sick pay, and I would applaud them for doing so and increasing the minimum wage. Stepping down for protections for even more casualised and even more vulnerable workers, that is something that we shouldn't be standing for when it comes to Labour Party politics.
The gig economy makes it far more difficult for workers' solidarity and collective bargaining because workers are deliberately atomized. I mean, back in the early 1900s, when workers' movements were building power, they were largely from factories and places where workers communicated and were in other's presence. That's not so much the case anymore for many sectors, including retail. So, I mean, the question I have is how can workers combat this? And how can we build solidarity and collective action when dealing with this kind of atomized individualist economy?
We have to be using media first and foremost, both old and new media and social media, to be trying to put forward the case for large scale unionization in this country. We cannot let the hustle culture economics of the Patrick Bet Davids and the Gary Vaynerchuks of this world to capture an entire new generation of people into thinking that we should be accepting this dog eat dog, hyper competitive, hyper individualized, and hyper atomized economy that's been created by neoliberalism. We cannot let them be the only force that's marketing towards these people. We have to use every avenue that we can to put forward to people that the only way you can protect your rights is collectively. Now, of course, legislation will help. Having people who want to legislate to be able to protect these people is important. So, having elected representatives from independents to Green Party people, or whatever kind of new leftist movement might arise in the future, like these are all good things. We should be doing that. But we cannot rely just on politicians to do it. We have to reach out to people and get them in the position where they see unionization as fundamental to a collective fight against the employers doing whatever the hell they want with workers' rights in this country. And this is going back to our previous point, where people like Eddie Dempsey and Mick Lynch and other trade union representatives like Sharon Graham and Dave Ward are going to be key for that messaging, because people will respect people who put these points to them having got the experience. People look at people like Gary Vee and Patrick Bet David and say, well, these people are successful themselves. I should try and emulate them. Well, Mick Lynch was successful in getting a good deal for his workers. Eddie Dempsey has been part of that as well, and so have Sharon Graham and Dave Ward. If we look at all of the wins that Unite the Union have had recently, so many wins, including getting people who were previously outsourced by the NHS in-sourced as part of their trade union negotiation, as part of the dispute over wages, bringing people back in-house. I was under a Conservative government as well. We need these people not just speaking to their own members, but as part of our recruitment drive for people to join the trade union movement as well. This is going to involve outreach, it's going to involve smart media, and it's going to involve smart messaging. This is something the left has failed on. As I said, trade union membership record lows in this country because I'm assuming there are probably lots of young people when the unionization rate for under 25s is 9%, probably don't even have any idea what a trade union even is. And this is why we need to get the message out now. There's no time to wait.
Support independent media, support social justice that's there on social media. Thank you. Turn left.